Right, sir. And at the time then...
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, the record should reflect that each of the jurors has taken the opportunity to compare People's 57 Defense 1011 with the still frame video that is now on the screen. Ms. Clark, I would suggest we print this out.
Thank you, Your Honor. Then at the time that you see the officer on the walkway as depicted in the photographs and in the video from which the photographs were taken, the crime scene tape, is it up or down?
It's down.
And what is the significance of that, sir?
No,
What does that mean?
that the crime scene investigation at that time has been concluded.
And what does that mean with respect to whether it was appropriate or not for the officer to be on that walkway walking in the manner you see him in the video and on that still?
It would be appropriate for him to do that.
Can you tell us, sir, in the course of your investigation in this case, approximately how many witnesses have been interviewed?
I'm aware of, I believe, 170 formal interviews that are written. There are several other interviews that are taped. There's in excess of 440 clues, I believe, with numerous interviews associated with each one.
Each of those clues has been investigated, sir?
That's correct.
And were all of those clues with respect to, were all clues followed up?
We get clues in almost on a daily basis, and it's an ongoing process. But they are all being followed up or have been.
And did you follow up clues that, excuse me, strike that. May I have a moment? And has the investigation of this case, the investigation of this case stopped, sir?
No, it's ongoing.
Is that unusual?
No, not at all.
Can you explain that, please?
In most of my cases, we get information all the time from different sources. Certainly in this case, due to the great amount of publicity, we're getting information on a daily basis and attempting to follow up on all of it.
Well, sir, but in your other cases, has your investigation stopped at the moment of trial?
No.
For how long? For how long does your investigation continue in your other cases, not just this one?
Continues right into trial and right through trial.
Is that a typical thing?
Yes, it is.
And do you continue to follow up all leads in all cases that you investigate, that you handle?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have here the printout still from the videotape marked Peoples 101. As it is, be 101A.
All right, 101A.
In that respect, sir, is this case any different than the other cases you've handled?
Oh, just as to the volume of information coming in.
Mr. Cochran?
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Detective Lange.
Morning, sir.
Prior to your undergoing redirect examination, you had a number of conversations with Ms. Clark, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Regarding your testimony and the questions she would ask you?
Yes.
And you discussed and went over the content of the questions and answers that we posed to you, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So that you knew what questions she was going to ask, and in fact, that you rehearsed what you were going to be testifying about, isn't that correct? Well,
Rephrase question.
well, you discussed what you were going to be talking about here in court yesterday and today, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And in the course of that, when did you do that? When did you have that conversation?
I believe there were more than one conversation.
All right, we'll start at the first one. Let's take when the first one was that you had this conversation with Ms. Clark, preparing you for your redirect examination.
For redirect?
Yes.
I don't recall. Perhaps last week?
Last week, while we were off on this case, that you had occasion to talk to Ms. Clark during that time frame?
I believe it was last week.
Well, counsel, we weren't off from this case just
Well,
last week.
When we were off, when the jury wasn't here.
When the jury
All
was
right, that's right. I put it, we were working, yes, Your Honor, so stipulated. When the jury was not here with us last week, you had occasion to talk to Ms. Clark about your upcoming testimony, is that correct?
Yes.
And where did that first conversation take place?
I believe it was here in the building.
And was anybody else present during that conversation?
I don't believe so.
Now, just the two of you were talking?
Well, there are people that are constantly moving in and out of her office.
Well, the primary conversation was between you and she, is that correct, sir?
Well, there were one or two conversations that I recall that we had in regards to redirect. It's primarily the two of us, yes.
All right, and that took place, as best you can recall, last week up in Ms. Clark's office, is that correct, sir?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, what date was the first conversation?
I don't know.
What date was the second conversation?
I don't recall what date. It was some day last week.
One day last week.
I believe it was last week.
And did you talk about your testimony yesterday before you took the stand for redirect examination?
I don't believe so.
Did you talk about it today, this morning, before we started, on this part of the case?
There was some conversation, yes.
And that, again, was between you and Ms. Clark, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with regard to this video that we just saw, I want to have that video replayed if I can, Your Honor. Can
All
you have
right.
that replayed?
People's 101.
Yes. You have shared before it's being put up. You shared with us that, the best of your recollections, the scene was broken down on June 13th, perhaps at about 3:45 in the afternoon. Is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
So, as we know, police officers were free to walk in and out at that point. Hold on, please. Police officers were free to walk in and out of the scene at that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we also know that, according to your testimony, there were some alleged blood spots on the rear gate of this premises. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And no photographs were taken of those blood spots on June 13th. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And nobody even bothered to come back, and you didn't go back and even check until July 3rd, some 3 weeks later. Isn't that right?
The rear gate area,
Yes.
That's correct.
And that scene had been broken down all of that time. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you came back on at least 2 or 3 occasions between June 13th and July 3rd, and you never went back to the rear. Is that correct? None of this good.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, let us see that video if we can. Ms. Clark showed you this video last week when you were meeting and talking about your redirect examination?
I don't believe I've ever seen this video.
It's very dark. Let me back it up, Your Honor. Can you back up the... All right. Now let's stop it there. That white blanket or sheet, was that a blanket or sheet that had been placed over Miss Nicole Simpson's body?
That appears to be, yes.
And when you arrived at the scene, after you got the call and you from robbery homicide took over this case, when you first arrived there, was the blood in and around Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's body still wet?
There were parts that I would term around her on the pavement sticky.
All right, and that blanket or sheet there was placed over her body at some point?
Yes.
And do you see the red portions on that blanket or sheet, which is white,
Yes.
that appear to you to be blood?
Yes.
And that blanket or sheet had been on top of her body at some point?
Earlier in the day, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you never saved that blanket or sheet, did you?
No.
Do you know whether or not there's trace evidence on that blanket or sheet?
Trace evidence?
Trace evidence from her body.
I would have no way of knowing what was on that blanket.
And you never saved it. Was it ultimately thrown away?
I believe so.
Now, you're not a criminalist, are you?
That's correct.
And you're not a doctor, are you?
No.
All right, let's continue on with the video. When's the last time you saw this sheet with the blood there on her blanket?
Morning of the 13th.
And do you know whatever happened to it?
No, I don't.
Did you ever come back to the scene on June 13th after you left about 12 noon?
I don't believe I returned that day.
All right, so if this took place, this video took place at 3:45 or thereabouts, you weren't even there, were you, at that point?
I don't know what time the video took place.
Well, if you just told us that the scene was broken down at 3:45, so I
Correct.
presume that the first part of the video started at 3:45. Is that a fair statement?
This particular appears to me to be a cutaway, so I don't know exactly what time. The log indicates it was broken at 3:45.
All right, well, when Ms.
This is
Clark...
obviously sometime after that.
All right, but we saw an officer with taking the yellow tape down. You recall that?
That's correct.
All right. So you have any problem with that having been close to 3:45?
Again, approximately 3:45.
And you never saw any of this, did you? What's depicted in the video?
I wasn't there.
All right. Now, with regard to officers and their feet and blood, I want to show you a photograph. Let me just step down.
Yes.
With regard to, and Your Honor, for the record, we're looking at plan is 54, and this is 54-2. 54-2 photograph. I want you to look at 54-2 here and make sure all the jurors can see it. You see this red substance kind of in the grout ways there of the towel there? You see that?
Yes.
And you see this shoe? It's a black shoe, appears to be a black man's shoe,
Yes, I do.
and similar to the shoe you have on there, isn't it?
Certainly is.
And we won't, well, have any photographs of those shoes, but that looks like that shoe, does it not?
It appears to be the same type of shoe, yes.
All right, and do you see where that, it appears to be a right shoe, doesn't it? You see, it appears to be a right shoe, does it not?
I can't tell from that angle.
All right, Detective, can you keep your voice up before...
I can't tell from the angle
You-
left or right.
Okay, you can't tell whether it's a right or left shoe?
No.
It's one of the shoes, is it not? It's right or left, isn't it?
Yes.
And judging from where that is, if that was a left shoe, where would the person be standing?
Probably off to the right here,
All
to
right.
the gate.
All right? But
Or they could be standing at an angle to the side.
all right? But you can't tell us that, can you?
No?
All right, but you can tell us that that shoe is standing right on top of the blood there in that grouting. You see that?
No, it appears to me that it could either be up on the toe or perhaps the arch.
You're telling what? You're telling this jury that this shoe, this particular shoe, the person is on his arch?
I'm not telling you, I'm saying I don't know.
All right.
It could be on the toe, or it could be over the arch. From that angle, to me, it's a little hard to tell.
All right. Well, I understand the jury has to make the final decision, but look at that photograph, sir. Take a moment and look at it.
I have.
All right. Does that look as though the front of that shoe, every portion you can see on that shoe, is flat against the tile, sir? Isn't that correct?
I can't tell.
You can't tell that?
Not from that angle.
Would you agree that there's blood underneath where that shoe is?
It appears to be blood in the grouting underneath the shoe, but as far as the shoe goes, whether it's underneath the arch or that person is up on their toe, I don't know.
Well, when you walked around the scene, did you walk around on your tippy toes that day?
At times where I was on my toes, that's exactly correct.
And is this you here?
It
Is
may
that your
well
shoe?
be.
All right.
And I had no blood on my shoes.
All right. But with regard to this particular shoe, you can't tell whether that's you or Furman, can you? Or any other detective, can you?
I don't know who it is.
All right. And you agree with me, the picture, this photograph will speak for itself. Is that correct?
Objection, that's argumentative.
Sustained.
Well,
Calls for two.
all right, Joe. At any rate, so that we're clear, looking at 54-2, you cannot tell us whether or not that's your shoe. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And you will agree, however, that the shoe is on the grouting, and under that grouting, there's blood. Is that correct?
No.
There's not.
I cannot agree with you that the shoe is on the grouting if that particular person is up on their front toes, or if the grouting is beneath the archway of the shoe. I can't tell you.
All right.
I can't tell from that angle.
But there is blood on the grouting. Is that correct?
It appears to be. That's correct.
That appears to be? Can you look at that
Appears
again?
to be blood. That's correct.
All right. And you were out there that morning. You know there was blood in the grouting, don't you?
That's correct.
All right. Your Honor, I'd like to move this photograph down to the other end so the other jurors can see it also.
Certainly. Mr. Douglas, you want to help us? Photographers are directed not to attempt to photograph this exhibit. Mr. Douglas, could you turn the board around, please? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
That photograph that we were just referring to, number 54-2, was that taken at Mark Furman's direction, if you know?
I don't know.
Was that photograph taken at your direction?
Very possibly.
What do you recall?
That specific photograph, no.
You don't recall who directed that photograph to be taken?
Again, I do not recall who directed that specific photograph to be taken.
Do you know whether or not you were at the scene when that photograph was taken?
I can't say whether I was or not.
All right. Now, Detective Lange, with regard to the tennis shoes, and you recall the video where you were shown carrying the tennis shoes under your arms, remember that?
Yes.
And were you trained to do that in the academy in case there's trace evidence on an item such as that to carry it under your arms like that?
I don't really understand that question.
Okay, let me see if I can ask it another way. When we saw you in the video carrying the tennis shoes under your arm, do you recall that?
Yes.
All right, would you like to see it again? Is that a fresh recollection?
I recall the video. I don't need to see it again.
All right. And the way you were carrying the tennis shoes in the video, were you seeking at that time to protect trace evidence, which may or may not have been on those particular shoes?
Trace evidence may or may not have been a consideration. The reason that I obtained those shoes was to have red stains checked for the possibility of blood and to obtain a shoe size.
We understand that, and we know there was negative for blood, right?
That's correct.
All right. The question was about trace evidence, sir. And
Trace evidence, sir, was not foremost on my mind.
All right. Well, I understand that, but you're the investigator, and I understand it may have been foremost on your mind. But if there were trace evidence on those particular tennis shoes, wouldn't that be valuable evidence either to exonerate or to inculpate Mr. Simpson? Isn't that correct?
I think that's argumentative, but it's possible, and maybe
since,
not. I really
nobody's-
couldn't say.
Since nobody's objecting, why don't you just try to answer it? Question.
That's my answer.
All right. That you don't think the trace evidence would have been relevant in this instance?
No, I said it could be, and maybe it couldn't be.
In the course of your discussions with Ms. Clark, did she tell you that you needed to be more aggressive in your answers at some point? Because I was making points in cross-examination. Did she tell you that?
Aggressive?
Yes. Be more aggressive in your
I
responses.
don't recall her instructing me to be more aggressive.
What
no.
word did she use?
I don't recall any word that she used.
Did Mr. Darden use the word be more aggressive?
I don't recall Mr. Darden telling me to be more aggressive.
All right. At any rate, you weren't concerned about trace evidence as you carried these tennis shoes under your arms. Is that correct?
Trace evidence was not foremost in my mind under those circumstances.
The question was, sir, please answer the question. Were you concerned about trace evidence when you carried those tennis shoes under your arm?
Oh, well, trace evidence was not foremost in my mind at that time.
That's not my question. The question was, were you concerned about trace evidence?
It was not foremost in my mind.
Well, if there were blood on those tennis shoes and you carried it under your arms, wasn't there a chance you might wipe that blood off?
Not from the stains that I observed. They were on the top of the shoe, on the side of the shoe. They appeared to be dry. Those shoes had been sitting in that closet on the floor. They'd been in other places other than the crime scene. Trace evidence, because of that reason, was not foremost in my mind.
All right, well, let's look at the video.
I obtained those shoes to obtain a shoe size and to check for the presence of blood.
You've told us that, and we know it was negative for blood. Can we see the video? I want to ask some questions about it.
Yeah, Mr. Cochran, which defense exhibit is this?
Your Honor, let me check. $10.49, I'm advised, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Now, stop it there. Well, you see how you're carrying the tennis shoes at that point?
Yes.
And at that point, I know trace evidence wasn't uppermost in your mind because you have the shoes against your body there, don't you?
They're against my arm, yes.
Yes, and is that a way that you, as an experienced investigator of over 20 years, learned to carry evidence?
That's one way of carrying evidence, yes.
And you learned to carry it that way, did you, at the academy?
There's no one way to learn to carry evidence.
All right, but certainly you carried it on this way on this date, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, continue on.
Hold on.
You can print that out, Jim.
Do you want to print that
Yes.
out because the...
Yes, it's part of 1049, and we'll
Yes.
perhaps make this 1049A.
Yes.
Print that out, Mr. Harrison. Thank you. Is that your clipboard that you have those shoes on?
Yes.
That's not a box, is it?
Box is in the trunk.
It's not a box, is it?
That's a clipboard.
All right. I thought so. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Now, I think we already established that those tennis shoes were then taken by you to the lab the next morning on June 14th, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you've testified that you saw criminalist Fung at the Rockingham location sometime after 5:20 on the afternoon of June 13th. Is that correct?
I don't recall the time.
Well, what time do you think it was that you saw him?
I believe I arrived approximately at that time. I don't recall what time I might have seen him.
Sometime after 5:20, would that be a fair statement?
I can't say.
Well, you saw him after you got there, didn't you?
I believe I did.
All right. And at that time, did it ever occur to you at any time before you left to get in your car to go home to give those tennis shoes to Mr. Fung, since ultimately they had to go to the lab anyway?
I believe Mr. Fung had left by the time that I retrieved those tennis shoes.
The question was, did it ever occur to you to give those tennis shoes to Mr. Fung? That's the question.
If he's not there, I couldn't have given them to him, so no, I wouldn't have.
The fact that you could have recovered the shoes and stayed around, he may have been there earlier. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just asking, did it ever occur to you to give those tennis shoes to Mr. Fung, or for that matter, any other criminalist who may have been at that scene?
Mr. Fung was not there when the shoes were recovered, so it certainly did not occur to me.
At what time were the shoes recovered?
I believe it was sometime after 6 or 6:15.
Do you have a record that indicates that?
The time of recovery?
Of recovery of those shoes. Can you look in your notes and tell us that?
No.
You're speaking from your own independent recollection?
Speaking from my recollection, and I don't recall seeing Mr. Fung at that location at that time that I came down and left.
Do you know what time Mr. Fung left that evening?
No.
Have you seen a log which would indicate what time he left?
No.
Do you have such a log?
Do I have a
Yes,
log?
as to what he left.
I don't believe I do.
In your books there, do you have the criminalist log, which would indicate what time Fung left on June 13th from the Rockingham location?
I don't have a criminalist log.
All right. Do you have a log which indicates what time you left?
I don't know if there was a log that was taken at that time or not.
Can you take a look? Could you take a look for us and tell us whether you have that?
Yes, it's right in front of me.
First of all, does that log indicate what time you recovered these tennis shoes?
No, it wouldn't indicate a time of recovery.
All right.
May I see counsel at the sidebar without the report, please?
Certainly.
Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
The log before you, what time does that show that you arrived back at the location of Rockingham? It's 17:15?
Shows that I arrived at 5:15, yes.
All right, 5:15. And as far as you know, Fung was still there at least until 5:20, isn't that correct?
I don't recall.
When you... Certainly, use your microphone.
Again, I don't recall.
Did you ever see Van Adder give criminalist Fung Mr. Simpson's blood that was contained in a vial that had been taken downtown here at Parker Center out at Rockingham at about 5:20 or thereabouts on the evening of June 13th, 1994?
I didn't actually see him do that, no.
You never saw it? You weren't present when that happened, or if it happened?
I don't recall seeing it. I don't recall seeing it happen visually.
All right. So, at any rate, what time does it show you leaving the Rockingham scene?
At 7:10 p.m.
All right, and that refreshes your recollection, that's about the time that you left?
Yes.
And at that time, you don't know, or do you know whether or not Fung had already left at that point?
No, I don't recall seeing him.
All right. Did you talk to Mr. Fung at all while you were at the Rockingham location that afternoon after you came back at 5:15, if you recall?
I may have had conversation with him.
And where would that conversation have taken place?
Probably in the house, upstairs in the master bath area.
Now, you and I had some discussions regarding a green piece of paper inside a bag that contained Mr. Goldman's clothes. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Hold on, let me toss the Goldman's out. All right, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. And prior to my asking you questions about that green piece of paper, had you ever seen that before?
No.
And did you not tell us that the items in that green paper bag were recovered by Officers Tippin and Carr? Did you tell us that, Mr. Goldman's residence?
I don't recall if I did. If I did tell you that, then I misspoke.
Well, maybe I can read it to you. That if you said that, if you said the clothes were... Yes.
Day before yesterday.
He has it on his computer, and I think I can get it on his computer.
We all have it on our computer. I don't think it's on the note yet.
Deal with it. This is from his computer. Let me ask you this question.
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection at this
Thank you.
point.
Do you recall being asked, this is the day before yesterday, this question by me and giving this response? Question at line 26. How were these clothes recovered, and what is the connection of the bag with the clothes? Answer, once again, they were recovered by Detectives Tippin and Carr. You remember so testifying?
I may have.
And you went on to say, I wasn't there, I couldn't answer that question, but it was booked in the Vaughn's Pavilion bag along with this envelope. Is that correct? Answer, apparently. Remember so testifying?
Apparently.
All right, now, is that what happened?
No. Pardon?
Is that what happened?
No, those clothes were recovered by the Goldman family.
So you want to change your testimony under oath?
If I stated that, then I misspoke.
You misspoke?
That's correct.
So Tippin and Carr didn't recover them?
Did not. The clothing was recovered by the Goldman family.
And when you were testifying the other day, when you were under oath, you were trying to be as accurate as you could, were you not?
I always try to be as accurate as I can.
I'm not what you always do. The other day when you testified.
The other day, today, always.
All right. But you were wrong, right?
Apparently I was.
And you spell out for us the other day that you do make mistakes, isn't that correct?
Just like everyone else, I certainly do.
Well, we're not talking about everybody else right now, we're talking about you. You make mistakes, is that right?
I certainly do.
Overruled.
You make mistakes, is that correct?
Mr. Cochran, I make mistakes.
All right.
Yes.
And with regard to these theories that you expounded yesterday, you will agree with me, will you not, that with regard to what happened on June 12th in the late evening hours ultimately must be decided by this jury and not by your theory. Isn't that a fair statement?
That's argumentative.
Well, see if I can restate it. All right. You will agree with me, will you not, that as to the facts of this particular case, that has to be determined. No. I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to finish the question.
Finish the question.
Right. You will agree with me, will you not, that as to the facts of this particular case, the facts in this case must be determined by the jury. It's not the exact same question.
Oral. Yes or no?
Yes?
A truism.
Right. Absolutely a truism. Now, well, I'm not asking for her opinion, Your Honor.
All right. Well, you got mine. Let's move on.
I've got yours. Right. I have to deal with yours, but not hers. All right. Thank you. Now, with regard to your theories, you've been wrong and mistaken in this case before. Isn't that correct? You made mistakes in this case?
There were mistakes made.
Well, I know there were mistakes made, but did you make any mistakes?
I believe you just pointed one out in my testimony.
Well, there are others, aren't there? What about, let me just ask you this, regarding mistakes. The blood on Miss Nicole Simpson's back, you saw that at the scene, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
That blood was not preserved. Is that correct?
That's correct. The coroner did not preserve that blood.
So that was the coroner's mistake, not yours?
I'm not pointing fingers as to whose mistake. I think that there's a communication problem, certainly at the very least.
Well, as the investigator in this case, if that was possibly important evidence that may have led to the exclusion of Mr. Simpson, do you think that it would have been good to communicate that to the coroner's office so that would have been maintained and preserved and tested? He's talked about communication, Your Honor.
Call roll. You can answer the question.
That was communicated to the coroner's office,
And who'd you communicate that to?
to the coroner's investigator at the scene.
And you communicated, they both were speaking English, is that correct?
Yes, we were.
And then you found out sometime later that those results, so the blood had not been tested or examined or collected, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Did you talk to the person you spoke to about that
Yes,
afterwards?
yes.
And what's that person's name?
I believe it's Mahaney.
Mahaney, is that a criminalist at the coroner's office?
Yes.
So it was Mahaney's fault?
I'm not saying whose fault it was.
All right. What about the failure to preserve the stomach contents of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson? Whose fault was that that was thrown out?
I don't know that it was anyone's fault. I do know I'm not in charge of stomach contents or what occurs at the coroner's office.
Well, now, let's see. As an experienced investigator, and you know the importance of stomach contents from a standpoint of trying to determine, as a factor in determining the time of death of an individual, and you're there at the autopsy, wouldn't you suggest to the coroners that it would be a good idea to save these stomach contents? Wouldn't you do that? She's testifying, Your Honor.
Oral.
No.
You may answer. You wouldn't suggest that?
That's their call.
All right. You never suggested that in this case?
I don't recall ever suggesting the coroner to maintain any stomach contents in any case.
Now, you were present when Dr. Golden was doing this autopsy, is that correct?
Yes.
And you understand any logic at all in preserving and saving the stomach contents of Mr. Goldman while not preserving and saving the stomach contents of Nicole Brown Simpson?
Oral.
I see logic in examining both contents, and
Yes.
that was done. As far as their policies on preserving stomach contents, I'm not familiar with it. I don't know how long they do that or under what circumstances. I just don't know.
Well, now, you've attended more than 250 autopsies in your long career, isn't that correct?
No, I don't think so. It's probably more like 150.
So 150 autopsies. And in those cases where time of death is at question, isn't it accepted in the community of investigators and criminalists that the stomach contents are one important factor in helping us determine the time of death, sir?
Oral.
Yes or no? It may be, and it may not be. It's one factor, and it's not an exact factor in determining death,
Right.
the time of death.
But in this case, it was thrown away, so we don't have it at all, and that's the point. Isn't that a mistake?
I can't say what's a mistake. I know that it was examined, and to me it would be much more important to examine those contents and make a determination just how full the stomach was.
And who
as far as
examined?
retaining those contents, again, I don't know what their policies are.
If the coroner's office admits that's a mistake, would you agree that's a mistake since it's their field?
Sustained.
Now, talking about other mistakes, with regard to your report, which indicated that you booked 2 dimes and 2 pennies, do you recall that?
Correct.
And in fact, you told us on the stand here you only booked 1 dime and 1 penny. Is that right?
I didn't book either. They were booked by the criminalists. I inadvertently wrote down 2 dimes and 2 pennies when in effect it was only 1 dime and 1 penny.
Is that a mistake?
I'd certainly call it a mistake, yes.
When you told us under oath that you had seen these blood spots on the rear gate at Bundy, yet no photographs were taken of those blood spots on June 13th, 1994. Would you consider that a mistake?
That, again, was probably a problem with communications. At a crime scene, the criminalists, the print people, the photographers, the other detectives are all given assignments. The detective in charge, while responsible for their overall performance, can't follow each technician around and make sure that they do every little thing that they ask of them. So you assign out jobs, and that particular assignment came under the purview of the criminalist. Unfortunately, it was not done.
Now I can get back to my question. Was that a mistake that wasn't done? That's the question.
Was it a mistake of mine?
I didn't ask whose mistake. I said, was that a mistake, Detective Lange?
I would call that a mistake, a
All right.
problem with the communications.
In fact, there were photographs taken of some spot on the front gate. Isn't that correct? Which we saw yesterday. Number 116?
I believe so.
All right, but they weren't taken of the rear gate, right?
That's correct.
Now, that was a mistake, but that was someone else's mistake. Isn't that correct?
You could categorize it as a mistake, yes.
Now, you'd agree with me, would you not, that since you're the lead investigator in charge at Bundy of this particular case, some of this falls on your shoulders also, does it not?
Certainly.
Now, by the way, the dime and the penny were found on the north side of the Jeep vehicle, is that correct?
I believe so.
And you were asked some questions about tire track marks. You recall that yesterday?
Yes.
And Ms. Clark showed you a photograph of that alleyway where it was asphalt or whatever, some kind of black substance. You recall seeing that?
Yes.
Now, the area, however, where the tire track marks were was not in the alleyway. That was a different kind of material behind the garage area of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's residence. Is that correct?
There were tire tracks
All right.
on that area, yes.
And I want to show you 2 photographs in sequence and ask you some questions about it. We're going to show, if the court pleases, fence 1032 and the fence 1033. And I want to ask you some questions about those two. If you use the elbow. First of all, can you see we tried to place them in juxtaposition to each other and sequentially they're on the Almo now too. Can you see what appear to be?
Objection to the characterization sequence.
Sustained.
All right, we've placed them, the 2 photographs together. And do you see what appears to be tire tracks on those 2 photographs, 1032 and 1033?
Appears to be, yes.
All right. And do you see also where the coins from those 2 different photographs, which are LAPD photographs, right?
I'd say so, yes.
That those coins have been moved, they're in a different position?
They appear to be.
All right. Did you ever, as the lead investigator at Bundy, do anything to try and check or to check out those tire track marks there?
I observed the tire tracks when I was there and formed an opinion.
I didn't ask you about that. I said, did you ever do anything? Did you call any experts out?
That was what I did.
You called an expert out?
No, I formed an opinion that an expert was not needed.
All right. So you made that judgment yourself. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
And are you, in addition to being the homicide investigator, also a tire track expert also?
I know when tire tracks have been run over and over and over again, and that this is a very commonly used area back here for tires, and that you can't tell the age of a tire track, and then it would have been fruitless to go any further with it.
Did you ever talk to an expert about that?
I know of no expert in tire tracks. I know of criminalists and photographers who could have photographed this, but aside from that,
Did you talk to them at all?
no.
All right, so-
Regarding the tire tracks, no.
Yes. What you did, you made a visual observation, and you've given us your opinion now that there's no relevance in this particular evidence. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're telling us, sir?
This is a driveway that it's very common to see tire tracks transpose over one
I'm
another.
asking you whether there's
That's my
relevance
opinion.
in this evidence,
Wait,
Your Honor.
wait. Mr. Cochran, let the witness answer before you start asking the next question.
All right, I was trying to get the question, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
My
All right.
opinion.
Hold on. One at a time.
All right, let me ask you again. You looked at these tire tracks as depicted on 1032 and 1033, and you made a decision that you didn't need to talk to any further expert about this. You gave us your own opinion in that regard. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
All right. And by the way, could these photographs show different dimes and pennies?
Could they show different?
Yes. Are those different dimes and pennies, or are those the same, if you know?
They're in a different position, so I can't say for sure.
But you told us you only booked one dime and one penny, right?
The criminalist booked 1 dime and 1 penny.
Right. But what did you see out there that night?
My recollection is 1 dime and 1 penny.
But you wrote 2 dimes and 2 pennies, is that right?
Oh.
I wrote 2 dimes and 2 pennies incorrectly. I observed 1 dime and 1 penny in the driveway.
Can you tell us, in looking at the monitor, whether or not there are tread marks under these coins?
I can't see under the coins.
And could you tell whether or not there were tread marks over the top of the coins?
Doesn't appear to me to be.
And you saw that you did it with your naked eye, did you?
I observed the coins with my naked eye, yes.
All right, these photographs that we're looking at, 1032 and 1033, were taken while you were there or at some later time, if you know?
I would say the top one was probably taken while I was not there. As far as the bottom one, it's hard to say.
You don't recall?
Well, I was doing a lot of things in a lot of other places.
Do you recall, is the question.
I do not specifically recall that bottom photograph being taken, no.
And with regard, however, to the material with regard to the tire tracks, when you were talking yesterday about asphalt, this is not asphalt back there, is it?
No, that appears to be cement.
Some kind of cement, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, you were asked yesterday some questions about your taking evidence and holding it someplace and not booking it for a period of time. Again, your LAPD manual, which you use as a guide, directs you to book evidence as soon as possible. Isn't that correct?
Generally, yes.
And where in your in the manual does it say that you can take an item like the plastic heart and put it at robbery homicide for 7 weeks? Is there a particular section that tells you can do that?
I don't know of any section
Because there is no section that says that, is there?
that says that I can keep a plastic heart.
Well, it says you can keep any item of evidence for 7 weeks without booking it into evidence in this case.
There's nothing to say that I can't.
In other words, you could take every piece of evidence in this case and hold on to it for 7 weeks if you want, in a manual that says you should book evidence as soon as possible. Is that what you're telling us?
I think it's a common sense call. Certainly, I wouldn't keep every bit of evidence in this case. The evidence in this case was collected by a criminalist who booked it.
We're talking about evidence. Let's talk about the plastic heart that was not booked until well into August. It was taken on or about June 13th, 1994. Is that right?
That's correct.
And in that instance, and we're talking about common sense and the manual, that instance, you would not hold evidence out generally for that long. Isn't that a fair statement?
There would be a purpose that I would hold any evidence out. Certainly, the evidence collected at the crime scene, save that plastic heart, would not have been held out by me, and indeed was collected and booked by the criminalist.
Well, what about the evidence that you talked about yesterday that was taken on the 13th but not booked to the 15th? What happened over the 14th, if you know?
What evidence would that be?
Well, you talked about evidence yesterday that Ms. Clark was asking you questions, you remembered, that was seized on the 13th, that showed a date of being booked on the 15th, I thought.
That's correct. That is the actual date that it was physically booked into the property division.
My question was, what happened on the 14th, which was the day in between, sir?
On the 14th, I believe the criminalist who had possession of that evidence was busy doing other things on this case.
Did the criminalist tell you that?
Did he tell me
Were
he
you
was?
told that?
I am aware that he was.
Or is that your speculation that they were doing other
No.
things? Do you know the reason it was not booked on the 14th, sir?
The reason, in my mind, was the fact that this criminalist was doing other things, and I believe at that date working on the Bronco. There's also dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence that have to be categorized, written up, measured. Reports have to be prepared before this is actually physically booked into evidence.
Were you told that by the criminalist, is my question.
Was I told
Did
what?
the criminalist tell you they were busy on the 14th, and that's why they didn't book the evidence till the 15th?
No.
All right. That's just your opinion you just gave us.
That's my information. I was aware that he was doing other things.
All right. Now, what about these Caucasian hairs on the gloves that we talked about? You indicated there were Caucasian hairs on both gloves. Is that correct?
I believe you indicated that.
Well, I ask you if you didn't know that as the lead investigator in this case.
I'm aware that there were Caucasian hairs.
On both gloves. Is that correct? Have any tests been done?
Objection. Counsel's not allowing the witness to answer.
I thought he was finished.
Proceed.
Are you aware of any tests that have been done on these Caucasian hairs that were on the gloves?
I believe there have been.
Counsel, ask the question. Can I ask the question? Look at the last. Is it going to have a timestamp on it?
Nope. Are you aware of any tests that have been done on these Caucasian hairs that were on the gloves?
That's the question.
No. Going down. Can we approach, Your Honor?
Yes. All right, thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Detective Lange, do you recall whether or not there were Caucasian hairs found? Let's take first the glove on Rockingham.
I believe my information was that there was, in fact, a Caucasian hair in that glove.
And were any tests conducted